The America needs to know. They need to know the truth. He was making fun of them.
Saying what?
That what difference does it make? It's just another life.
Well, that anonymous voice belongs to a veteran Border Patrol agent, one person who's had enough and says America needs to know what's going on behind closed doors at the border detention facilities. That same agent told CNN's Nick Valencia about conditions that mirror what we see in these newly released pictures, extreme overcrowding, more of what we're hearing in a moment. And then there's these drawings, disturbing drawings from kids who'd just been released from CBP facilities. Let's talk shortly with a child psychiatrist about them, the potential effects for kids in these facilities, both short-term and long-term. She'll take your questions as well, so comment right now with those. Plus, later on tonight's Goods, we want to start your 4th of July weekend off on a good note with this tenacious 95-year-old walking across the country with a message about freedom. While you might not have quite as big a mountain to climb this weekend, figuratively or literally, I do want to know how you are celebrating the 4th. If your answer is none of the above, you can share what you're planning with a comment, and I'll try to get final results, what everyone says, before the end of Full Circle. I can't even read what those possibilities, what are the 4 possibilities there? Fireworks, barbecue, I'm being told beach, all of the above. Okay, all good options. We'll start with the first thing first, top trending story on Facebook right now. It is a pivotal decision in a case that's drawn national attention. The district attorney in Jefferson County, Alabama, announced late today that she is declining to prosecute a gunshot victim in the death of her unborn child. Now, we had this woman's attorney on the program. Her name is Marsha Jones. A grand jury had indicted Marsha Jones, who was 5 months pregnant when she was shot in the abdomen during an altercation, during a fight. Her unborn baby later died. The shooter was initially charged with murder and attempted murder, but the charges were dropped against the shooter. Ms. Jones, the woman who had been pregnant, was charged with manslaughter, which the DA is now declining to prosecute. With that announcement, the DA said, quote, "There are no winners, only losers in this sad ordeal." I want to turn now to the situation at the border and these newly released photos showing overcrowding witnessed at border detention facilities. They were released by an internal government watchdog group in a scathing report. The group also quoted a senior Border Patrol manager calling a facility a, quote, ticking time bomb. Our Nick Valencia spoke exclusively with a veteran Customs and Border Patrol agent who wished to remain anonymous about the conditions and treatment of migrants. Nick Valencia joins us now. So, Nick, we played a little bit of your interview. Can you just start by showing us around where you are right now?
Yeah, sure, Anderson. We're outside of Border Patrol Station 1 here in El Paso. It's facilities like this that we have repeatedly, for weeks, if not months, asked DHS, asked Customs and Border Protection to allow us inside, to show the audience, to show the viewers exactly what the conditions are like in there. We've pleaded with them to be transparent. So far, they've repeatedly denied those requests. But we are getting a better sense of what conditions are like inside because of this Inspector General report. And while that Inspector General report focused on the Rio Grande Valley, conditions are, we're told, similar here in these facilities, Anderson.
So you spoke to that veteran Customs and Border Patrol agent about that facility there. What did they tell you?
They had a series of allegations, very serious allegations. You heard a little bit of sound at the top of the show. They talked about a denial of basic human rights, blankets, these Mylar blankets that migrants are given inside these facilities that are reused 10 at a time, never washed. She says that she was chastised one time by trying to give water to a Mexican migrant, a supervisor telling this agent that the water wasn't meant for Mexican immigrants, only baby formula. It is really serious allegations that we took to the Customs and Border Protection to try to respond to these allegations. They didn't directly address them. They did say they handed them over to the Office of the Inspector General. But, you know, during this conversation, Anderson, there was a couple of moments where this agent was kind of sort of, you know, staring off blankly. And I asked the agent, you know, what's on your mind? What are you thinking about? The agent said it's just really hard not to take home the emotional baggage from what they see day in, day out. Cells that are meant only for 40 people with 80 people crammed inside. Cells, they say, that are just filthy. Really just sort of surface cleaning done by the crews that come in to clean these facilities. The agent telling me they've never seen really a deep scrub done. You know, you remember last week I was on your show. We had emerged from the Clint facility, and it was in that facility where we were told by a Customs and Border Protection source that they prepped before we got there. Things smelled sterile inside. They wanted to put their best face forward. We have demanded, again, repeatedly, to try to get in to show the public what we're being told from agents like the veteran that I interviewed. So far, we've been unsuccessful, but we are continuing to push, if only because we think the public deserves answers. And these Inspector General photos, these images that are being released are really disturbing, and we want to see it with our own eyes.
Yeah. Nick Valencia, I hope that works out. Thank you very much. It is important to try to see as many of these facilities as possible. They're being paid for by taxpayers, after all. More now on these disturbing drawings released today. The American Academy of Pediatrics says they were done by kids who'd been in Border Patrol custody after being separated from their parents. For more on the effect detention could be having on kids, I want to bring in Dr. Jody Gold, child and adolescent psychiatrist from the Weill Cornell Medical College. She joins me now for the Full Circle interview. Dr. Gold, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, just on these pictures, I mean, there's two in particular to look at where it's very clear the drawings show jails, and one that shows people outside. The one right here we're showing. What do you see when you see these pictures?
Well, the pictures are obviously distressing. You don't really need to be a child psychiatrist to recognize how distressing these pictures are. They have 3 pictures from 3 different children, all which are showing sort of pictures of cages and jails. And if you're actually trying to understand children's inner life, we really often look at pictures.
You do. So this is a legitimate. I mean, because I always wonder about that.
So the deal is that kids that are 10 and 11 years of age don't really have the language to be able to talk about their feelings and to be able to create a narrative. But often they can project their feelings, their strengths, their weaknesses onto their play or to their pictures. So asking the kids to draw a picture of their experience makes a lot of sense. And what's so striking is what I was struck about in these pictures is if you look carefully at them, they spent a lot of time drawing these fences or cages. And the emphasis is really on them feeling alienated or isolated or caged. One of the pictures in particular, you can actually see that the child has they've drawn a family inside the cage and then some other guards or what look like guards with hats outside.
That's the one we're showing right now. And you're right. I mean, the cage is actually, for a child, that is, takes a lot of time and detail to draw it like that.
Right, so you're looking at where the emphasis is. So the emphasis in the picture here could be on flowers or pictures or people, but in this case, it's really on the lines that they've drawn, the cage that they've created.
It's also interesting that this child has people looking in the cage from the outside and obviously people who are in the cages.
I'm also struck by how the people are spread out. The people aren't together. It feels to me like the people in the cage are isolated from each other. Sometimes when you ask people to draw pictures of their family, they draw their family together, not separated.
Everyone says, well, look, kids are resilient. And you know this better than anybody. Is that true? And does something like this experience of being separated from your parent, being put in a cage like this with a bunch of strangers, maybe going to the foster care system, it's a long process for these kids. They're moved in the middle of the night. They don't necessarily know where they're going. Are kids that resilient?
No. I mean, kids are resilient, but the long-term effects of this trauma are for the rest of their lives.
Really?
And to be clear, these kids are already vulnerable, right? They've already been traumatized. They've already fled their homes to come to the United States. And then this repeated trauma is going to have long-lasting effects. What we know about the brain and development is having early childhood trauma leads to more mental health problems, more physical problems, more likelihood to have chronic medical problems, more difficulty with relationships, less sense of self, worse academic functioning. I mean, I think the long-term for these kids is really challenging.
It's interesting because, I think a lot of people think, well, look, this is an exaggeration. Kids can bounce back. These are little kids. But then when you think about PTSD, somebody in the military can have one very traumatic incident in which friends are lost or they come close to dying or whatever it may be, or they see something terrible, and that one traumatic incident in an adult can impact somebody for the rest of their life.
Absolutely. I would be shocked if many or most of these kids didn't have PTSD. There's all kinds of traumatic disorders for kids that have separation and trauma early in their childhood, and it absolutely is not just something that's going to blow over.
One of the things I saw quoted, I think it was from today, and I believe it was the president saying essentially, well, look, where some of these kids and people come from, it's much worse. Conditions are much worse.
It's not so much about the conditions, right? I mean, yes, it may be that the conditions are worse, but it's also about the treatment. They may have been with their parents, at least, if they were in these countries. Separating kids from their parents, them being in a situation where they don't understand the language, where their health is not being taken care of, is clearly really traumatic. I can't say what's happening in the countries they're coming from. What I can say for certain is that they're being traumatized here.
I was talking to a woman, Dr. Jane Aronson, who works with orphans. She has an organization, Worldwide Orphans Fund. And one of the things she said always stuck with me, which is that studies show that a kid needs essentially one person to love them. And if a kid has that one person, be it ideally it's a parent, ideally they have two parents, but if they're in the foster care system, but they just have one person who really loves them and makes that love known, that makes all the difference in a kid's life.
I can't tell you. I can't overstate that enough. You need one. It doesn't even have to be a caregiver. You need one grown-up that you feel attached with, that makes you feel safe and can provide some kind of safety in a relationship for you to grow up with a strong sense of self, to be able to have relationships. So that's key. Early attachment is a big deal, which is why separating kids from their parents is so incredibly traumatic.
The other thing is, to me, that must be so awful, as I think back to as a kid, is, I hated as a kid not having any control over what was going to happen to me. I didn't know where I would end up, all sorts of things that kids worry about. But in this situation, they really have no control, and they often do not know. They're told to get on a bus in the middle of the night and are driven across country to go to another shelter somewhere, and then that not knowing has got to be adding to the traumatic experience.
Incredibly traumatic. But you see that very poignantly in these pictures. They're scared, they're fenced off, they're in a cage. They're obviously frightened kids. I was struck by the descriptions of the pediatricians that were going to these places, where they were looking at the kids and they were emotionless. They weren't crying, they weren't laughing, and that really scared me.
Yeah, I think, in fact, one of the doctors who toured the CBP facility said the first thing that hit me when we walked in the door was the smell. It was the smell of sweat, urine, and feces. The doctor also said there was no laughing, no joking, no talking, just silence from a place that was full of kids.
That's really scary for me, because one of the reactions that kids have to stress is to close down, to become internalized. They don't trust the adults around them, because kids can laugh, they can cry, but only if they feel safe. And clearly these kids, or it sounds like these kids don't feel safe. And it sounds like they're shutting down. This whole idea that they'd be expressionless is really shocking and upsetting.
There's some places where we've seen kids are given a soccer ball and kids are playing soccer and they're outside, but obviously every facility has a different situation, and it seems like it's these CBP facilities which are just not set up to hold people, to hold children for long periods of time.
No, it doesn't sound like the facilities there are really trained to take care of kids, to take care of their physical needs and their emotional needs, to understand the dynamics of family, to help the kids feel safe. It would be really great if there were people there to help the kids feel safe, to help them understand what was happening next, right? You can handle trauma sometimes if you know that there's people that love you and you understand what's coming next, to your point.
The counter argument too, which a lot of people make, is that, well, this is, their parents are taking them on a very dangerous journey, or have sent them on a dangerous journey alone or with somebody else. And isn't that just as traumatic as the experience they're having in these facilities, perhaps?
And that may be, but I'm not sure why we need to compound the trauma for these children. I am sure that their journeys are traumatic, which is why it would be really nice when they got here that at least we could provide basic needs for them. All we're doing is adding more trauma to children that are already clearly traumatized.
That's a good point. Dr. Gold, thank you. Jody Gold, appreciate it. Sorry we're here under these circumstances.
Yeah.
It was good to talk to you. I want to move on to the goods, where tonight we'll kick off the July 4th holiday with the story of a real-life Forrest Gump. 95-year-old Ernie Andrus is a World War II veteran who served as a Navy corpsman in the Pacific, which, as you know, was an incredibly difficult place to serve. And he was a very good one. He never lost a man on the job, but Andrus has traded in his combat boots for running shoes and is now traveling across the country on foot.
Believe it or not, this is my running pace.
Well, Ernie, with his travel partner John, kicked off his trip in St. Simons, Georgia, taking his first steps back on March 13th. Let me just reemphasize, he's 95 years old and he's doing this. He made it through the hottest May in South Georgia on record. Now he's made it to the Sunshine State.
What was harder, World War II or walking across country?
World War II.
Well, here's the catch. This is not Ernie's first trip. In fact, he's already walked across the entire country once when he was a young buck at 93, 2 years ago. At his pace this time, Ernie is expected to make it to California in 5 years when he's 100. So why is he doing this, you might ask? Well, listen.
people should know that freedom is not free and what it takes to keep this country free. We were called on to do our part. The generations before us all had to do their part. And the future generations are probably going to have to do their part.
Well, Ernie Andrus doing his part on this July 4th weekend. You've got wish we had a box of chocolates and certainly got a place of honor here on The Goods. Thank you for what you're doing and for your service. Incredible. So what are you doing the 4th of July? 26% of you said fireworks, 39% of you said a barbecue, 5% of you said the beach, 30% said all of the above, which that sounds like a really good plan. I kind of wish I could hang out with you all, that 30%. I hope you follow our page so you never miss Full Circle. We got a special program for you tomorrow with a really heartwarming update. If you remember that teacher who's fostering his student who needed a kidney transplant, well, the spoiler alert is the kid, Damien, got a kidney and he's doing great. And I hope you watch it. He'll be on tomorrow. Until then, tune into AC360 tonight on CNN, 8 p.m. for more on the immigrant detention centers. I'm joined by Dr. Colleen Kraft, former president of the American Academy of Pediatrics, the group that released those drawings from kids who'd been in detention. I'll see you soon.